Hungarian Folk Tales. The Princess's Shoes. Once upon a time, there lived a most beautiful princess who was lovelier than any maiden on earth. Prince after prince came to her father's palace. Princes from all over the world surrounded the lovely princess, telling her the sweetest things, but it was no use. It all went in one ear and out of the other. In fact, she laughed at them so loudly that the whole palace resounded to her laughter. There was one among the princes who caught the princess's eye, and she took a fancy to him, but he was none the wiser for it, as the merciless princess poked even more fun at him than she did at the others. As time went by, it happened one day that two fleas hopped into the princess's palm. Well, she was as quick as lightning and held them fast in her hand. She took the two fleas to a pot containing lard and put them in there so that they would grow big and fat. She was right indeed, and hardly a year had gone by when the two fleas had grown so huge that their hide was big enough to make a pair of shoes. The princess made up her mind. She summoned the butcher, had the fleas skinned, ordered the shoemaker to tan the hides and the bootmaker to make her a pair of fine boots. She had it announced far and wide that she would marry the man who could tell her what animal's hide her boots were made out of. The princes came flocking again from far-flung corners of the world. They were all fine young men in their prime. They lined up in the courtyard and started guessing what animal's hide the princess's shoes could be made out of. But none of them got it right. Then the princess had taken a liking to, dressed in a beggar's rags, and sneaked into the princess's bedchamber, where he hid in the night, hoping to hear what the princess would tell her maid about the boots. He could not have been more right. The princess had a good laugh at all the silly answers she had been hearing all day and said to her maid, "You'll see, nobody will ever know that my boots have been made out of flea skin." That was enough for the prince. The next day he mingled in his beggar's clothes among the princes, and when his turn came, he uttered, "Your Royal Highness, your boots are made out of flea skin." The princess went white as a sheet, shivered like a leaf, but did not wish to go back on her word, so she said, "You're right, beggar, so from this moment forth, I'm your wedded wife, till death do us part." "All right, my lovely young wife, but take off your nice silk clothes and put on beggar's rags. Then we'll make a perfect match." The haughty princess donned a beggar woman's clothes and accompanied her husband to a dirty little hut on the outskirts of the village. As if all that had not been enough, she even had to beg with her husband day in, day out. On top of it all, she even had to make a fire and cook dinner for her husband as best she could with what little she had. To make matters worse, a farm labourer came and shouted to her in a loud voice, "Hey you, beggar woman, go at once to hoe the land on the prince's estate." What else could the poor princess do? She went off as she had been ordered, shedding many a tear on the way. Her husband then made straight for the palace. There he donned his bright royal clothes and walked out among the labourers. It was his fields that the beggar woman had been sent to. The prince kept on encouraging and praising the labourers, but scolded and humiliated his wife, saying that he had never seen such a bad farmhand, although the poor woman was sweating with the effort she was making. Dinner time came, all the labourers were seated at a big table, and silver cutlery was put next to the plate of each. The prince still had not had enough. He wanted his haughty wife never to forget the experience, so he told another woman labourer to slip a silver spoon into the beggar woman's pocket. There was a lot of toing and froing after dinner when the servants found a silver spoon was missing. They went through the pockets of all the labourers and found the silver spoon in the beggar woman's pocket. In vain did she swear that she had not stolen it. She was put in a dungeon. By this time, the lesson had been enough. Hardly had the door of the dungeon been locked than the prince had it opened again and walked in to his young wife. There he gently took her by the hand, led her up to the palace and said to her, "All right, your crying days are over. Put on your nice silk clothes again. I've put on mine too, for I was the beggar you married. Do you see now, my dear?" Well, to cut a long story short, they made up and started a new life together that was a joy to see for everyone. I saw it. Make sure you do too. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Man and His Horse. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there lived a poor man. Now he had 2 sons, and he had a grey horse. He was very poor and had to earn his bread by carting. Here and there he trudged with that grey horse of his, for that was the only way he could put food on the table. But the roads were so bad and very muddy. Now that grey horse had had enough of pulling the cart all by himself. Back he looked and said, "You're a good and kind owner, so will you buy a partner for me?" "You can speak?" "Of course I can, after all these years of learning how from you. So will you buy a partner for me?" "I would indeed, if only I had the money." "Do you know what? Let me loose and I'll get what we need." "How can I let you loose?" "If I do that, you'll never come back and you'll leave me here." "Die I won't for sure. You're my owner." So the man led him out of the stable, took the halter off him and let him go. The grey horse was very happy. Up went his tail, he whizzed around the yard once or twice, and off he went. The man was very worried. "That's a horse I'll never see back here again," he thought. Well, the grey horse headed off out of the village. Off he went up to the forest, and there he ate well from the greenest grass and came upon the sweet water of a bubbling spring. Then off he went to look around the forest. There he found the entrance to a fox's den. It looked good, so he snuggled himself into it, and there he fell asleep. Just then the vixen and her cubs woke up. It was coming time to go and find something to eat. So the vixen turned to her eldest cub and said, "Now, son, just go out and see what the weather's like outside." Off went the little fox, who got as far as the entrance to the den. He could see that everything had gone all white, so he quickly rushed back to tell the others. "Mother, we can't go out at all. There's been a big fall of snow, and it's blocked the way." That got him a slap on the ear from his mother. "How can you say there's snow when we're right in the middle of summer?" "Out you go," she said to another of her cubs, "and see what the weather's like outside." The second cub turned back and said to his mother, "Mother, we can't go out at all. There's such a lot of snow." Thump, and he got one across his ear as well. The vixen sighed and she went up. She looked, and right enough, everything had gone all white. She sniffed the air, but it wasn't cold. She thought about it and dug out another entrance to the den. When she went out, what did she see, believe it or not, but a great big grey horse that had died and was lying at the entrance to the den. It couldn't have come to a better place to die. We'll pull it in somehow, and that will see us through the long days of winter. Now, it was all very well for her to plan, but she couldn't even move the horse. Oh dear, what was there to do? She thought about it, and off she went to see the wolf. Who's there? It's me, Brother Wolf. What can I do for your sister Fox? I bring you good news, brother. Just let me in. And the wolf let her in. Right, there's a big grey horse that has come and died at my front door, and I can't drag him away. So I thought that you're a big and strong creature, and the two of us can surely drag him off somewhere and have his meat for the winter. The wolf licked his lips, and off he went with the vixen. Once they got there, around they sniffed. They pushed and they pulled, but it didn't work. Sister Fox, you haven't got a good hold of it. Try to push. They tried and tried, but they couldn't manage. Then she spoke up. Do you know what we can do? We can tie your tail to the horse's tail. You pull away and I'll push. That's the only way we'll manage it. Fine, Sister Fox, said the wolf. So the wolf went around to the horse's tail, and the fox made a fine tight knot out of their two tails. Well, the wolf started pulling and pulled and pulled until it was out of breath. Push now, sister, push. I'll pull and you can push. Now the horse felt the wolf pulling hard on his tail. He woke up and jumped to his feet. He shook himself, started to race off, and there was the wolf still tied to his tail and swinging from left to right as they went. And when the horse was sure the wolf was well and truly dizzy, off he galloped towards the village. Once he arrived home, he let out a loud neigh. Out rushed his owner. He's home, thank heavens, my fine grey horse. He quickly opened the gate to the yard. Here you are, good master, said the horse. I've brought you this wolf, so you can have his fine fur and sell it, and with that, you can buy another horse. And that's what happened. They took the wolfskin to the market, and with the price, they bought another horse, and went their way with two horses, just like any other men. And they all lived happily ever after. And that's the end of my tale of a poor man and of the tale of his faithful horse. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Magic Lock. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there lived a poor woman, and she had one son. One day she had to do the washing for someone, and when she got home, she found the place empty. Where could her son have gone? Where could he be? No one could tell her. If only she had known that devils had taken him away. They had carried him off to hell to set him to work for them. When the boy had spent 7 years with them, they assigned him 7 rooms. He had to do everything: sweep them, clean them, dust them up, anything and everything he had to do. Now in the 7th room there was a lock, a magic lock, and in that lock lived 12 devils. He worked and worked on that lock until he eventually stole it. He escaped from those devils and went straight off home to his mother. Now what did he say to his mother? He said, "Mother, go to the king and ask him for his daughter's hand, for I would like to take her as my wife." Off went his mother to the king and asked for his daughter as a bride for her son. The king roared with laughter at the idea of such a lad wanting his daughter in marriage, so he said, "Listen, my dear, I'll give my daughter to your son if during the night he can root up and destroy the forest that surrounds the village. Make it disappear without a trace. That's the only way my daughter will ever be his bride." So the poor woman went home and told her son what the king had said. Well, all the son had to say was, "If that's all that's needed, that's how it will be." When evening fell, he turned the key in the lock, and right away there were 12 devils in front of him. "Off you go, level that forest by morning, so roots and all have gone and nothing remains, not even a fallen acorn." And the devils set to work. Next morning there wasn't a sign or trace of the forest, even the roots had all been pulled up. The lad went to the king to report the task was done, and he had come to claim his daughter. "You can have her if by morning there stands in the forest place a fine field of green corn." Now that was no bother to the lad at all. He had his magic lock which helped him to do it all, and by the morning in place of the forest there was a fine field of bright green corn. Again the lad went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I have done what you asked." The king looked out and saw the fine corn, but all he said was, "Well indeed, you've done all your tasks. I'll give you one more. By morning lay out a road in front of my palace that is paved with diamonds, with trees at its sides and the trees full of birds. If you succeed in this task, then my daughter shall be yours." The lad went home and in the evening turned the key in the lock, and in the morning in front of the king's palace sparkled a diamond road with flowering trees and the trees full of birds. The king looked out and was almost blinded by the glittering brightness and the beauty of the trees. He couldn't believe his eyes. For that, it was worth giving his daughter's hand. And so it passed. On the following morning, there above the meadow hung a palace from a golden chain, and beautiful it was too. And that is where they lived. One day he went hunting, but he didn't take the lock with him and left it with his wife. She didn't know the value of the rusty old lock because her husband hadn't told her. Now the devils had a companion, and she was an ugly old witch. She happened to come by the palace, crying, "New locks for old! New locks for old!" The king's daughter heard her and was delighted, so she called out that she had one. Now that's just what the old witch wanted. Out she took from her pocket a new lock and exchanged it for the magic lock. Now the palace hanging from the golden chain immediately turned into a tumble-down old shack. The princess cried and cried, but she couldn't imagine how it had happened. When her husband came back, he almost fell over when he saw the tumble-down shack standing where his fine palace should be. His wife wept and told him how she had exchanged the lock for a new one from the old woman. Her husband was consumed by sorrow when he heard this. But he pulled himself together, went to the king, and told him the full and short of it. "Off you go to Mother Moon, who is all of 100 years old, and perhaps she will put things right." Off the lad went to see Mother Moon, who was all of 100 years old. But Mother Moon couldn't do anything about it. She just gave him a dog and sent him to Mother Sun, who was all of 200 years old. Off he went to her, but she just gave him a mouse and sent him on to Mother Wind, who was all of 300 years old. He told her why he had come, and she gave him a cat, and told him that there on an island in the middle of the deep blue sea lived an old witch, and it was she who had the lock. Wasn't he the happiest man there was? He did what he was told and went off to where Mother Wind told him to go. His way to the island wasn't easy, what with the mouse and the cat and the dog, but once they were there, it took the three animals no time at all to bring him the lock. When they got home, the young husband of the king's daughter turned the key in the lock, and straightway the palace was hanging there in its old place from a golden chain. The young pair were so happy, and they lived happily ever after.